Hi everyone, it's Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting, and welcome to this month's session of Mary's Threads, Ask a Quilter. Today we have 4 letters from quilters, including one from someone who agreed to repair an old denim quilt and now absolutely cannot stand the sight of it. And honestly, I think a whole lot of us have had at least one project like that. Anyway, we're also talking about gift, quilt, guilt, how to choose batting without losing your mind in the batting aisle, and how to make a small sewing space feel better. So if you're ever feeling guilty, overwhelmed, crowded, or completely stuck with a quilt you wish you had never said yes to, this is the one for you. This is a place where we celebrate the way you quilt, and we say goodbye to the guilt and the pressure that too often sneaks into our sewing rooms. Each one of us brings different preferences, different experience levels, different habits, and our own quilting personality to the table. And around here, our motto is simple. We love how we quilt, we're done with guilt, and we kindly don't care what others think we should do. Now for privacy purposes, I keep these letters anonymous, but I like to give each quilter a fun little pseudonym that fits their story. So let's get into our first letter. Letter number 1 from Suffering from Quilt, Gift, Guilt. Say that 3 times fast. Dear Mary, I often get requests to make quilts for weddings, babies, and other occasions, but sometimes I just don't have the time and I feel guilty saying no. Signed, Quilt, Gift, Guilt. So here's my answer. Dear Suffering from Quilt, Gift, Guilt. I think so many quilters know exactly what you mean. There's something about quilting that makes people think, well, you sew, so you can just whip up a quilt for this special occasion. As though a quilt is like a quick errand you can run between lunch and dinner. And of course, sometimes we really do want to make something for someone. Sometimes it feels meaningful and joyful and exactly right. But you know what? Other times it just feels like pressure, and that pressure can come wrapped in a very polite request. I had an occasion where a friend asked me to make a quilt for a birthday gift for a friend of hers. It had a very specific design that I would need to create, and it needed to be done in a very short amount of time. Of course, she had no idea how long it would take, how much it would cost, and how difficult it would be for me to fit that into my schedule at that particular time. So here's what I said. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm really honored that you asked, but you know what? My quilting calendar is full right now, and I'm just not able to take that on. I'm not sure she was okay with my answer, but you know what? I was. I just didn't have time with all of the work it would entail, and that was my response. It was kind, it was respectful, and for me, I felt like it was enough. Why? Because a handmade quilt is not a small favor. It takes time, it takes money, planning, fabric choices, sewing time, quilting time, and quite honestly, mental and emotional energy too. And when you say yes to a quilt you don't truly have the capacity to make, what often happens is you don't feel generous, you feel burdened. And that is not a good place to create from. Now, if you want to soften the no a little, you certainly can. You might suggest a later date, but only if you mean it. You might offer a smaller project. You might suggest a baby quilt instead of a large one, or even a pillow or a table topper, or something else that's handmade but more manageable. But I really want quilters to hear this. Just because you are capable of making a quilt does not mean you are obligated to make one every time someone asks. That is a huge difference. You are allowed to protect your quilting time. You are allowed to keep your creative energy for the things that matter most to you. And you are allowed to say no without feeling like you failed someone. So, suffering from quilt gift guilt, I give you full permission to answer kindly, clearly, and without dragging guilt into your sewing room. Now, speaking of being overwhelmed, let's move to a question that has probably confused almost every quilter at one point or another. Batting. So this is letter number 2, and it's from Batting Bewilderment. Dear Mary, every time I shop for batting, I am overwhelmed by all of the choices. Cotton, polyester, blends, wool, bamboo. How do I know what's best for my quilt? And it's signed Batting Bewilderment. Batting Bewilderment, you are definitely not alone. You know what? You walk into the quilt store thinking, I just need some batting. And about 10 minutes later, you're standing there reading labels like you're studying for a test you forgot was coming. There's cotton, there's polyester, there's a blend, there's wool, there's bamboo, loft, shrinkage, scrim, drape, stitch distance. And then, what about pimples and dimples? Which goes up? Which goes down? Does batting with a smooth complexion even exist? And suddenly, it feels far more complicated than it ought to. So here's the simplest way I know to think about batting. Start with the purpose of the quilt. Ask yourself, what is this quilt for? That question will usually help you more than anything else. If you want a flatter, more traditional look, cotton batting is often a great choice. Cotton tends to give you that classic quilt feel, and after washing it, it can shrink up a bit and give you that soft, crinkly texture that so many of us quilters love. Now, if you want more loft, more puffiness, and still something that is fairly lightweight, polyester may be a better fit. Polyester tends to have less shrinkage and can keep the quilt looking a little smoother after washing. A cotton poly blend can be a very practical middle ground. I usually use an 80-20 blend for most of my quilts. It can give you some of the softness and natural feel of cotton while also giving you a little more loft and durability. That's one reason why blends are so popular for quilts that are going to be used and washed a lot. Now, wool batting can also be beautiful. It's warm, it's breathable, and it is surprisingly light and cozy. It can make your quilting stitches stand out nicely, which is one reason why people really enjoy it for special quilts. And then bamboo batting tends to have a nice drape and a softness to it. If you want a quilt that feels supple and not too stiff, that can be something to look at as well. Now, here's the important part. There isn't one batting that is the correct batting for every quilt. There's just the batting that makes the most sense for that particular project. So think about things like, will this be washed often? Do I want a flatter or puffier look? Will I quilt this on my own machine? Do I want a traditional look or a loftier look? Is this for a bed, a wall, a baby, or just everyday use? And also, always read the package, because manufacturers often tell you things like recommended stitch distance, care instructions, and qualities that can make a real difference. Now, one more thing that helps a lot is take notes. When you make a quilt, jot down what batting you used, how it was quilted, how it washed if you washed it, and whether you like the end result. After a while, you'll start building your own experience book, and that becomes far more helpful than trying to remember what you read on a package 6 months ago, because believe me, you will forget. So batting bewilderment, don't worry about finding the one perfect batting for all quilts. Just focus on choosing the one that best matches the quilt you're making right now. So let's go from the batting aisle to the tiny sewing corner. This is letter number 3 from Cozy Corner Quilter. Dear Mary, I only have a small corner in my apartment for sewing. It's functional, but it feels cramped. Any tips for making it more comfortable? Signed, Cozy Corner Quilter. So here's my answer. Dear Cozy Corner Quilter, I really want to start here. You do not need a giant sewing room to be a real quilter. You don't need a beautiful custom studio. You don't need built-ins. You do not need a room full of matching furniture and pretty baskets. If you have a little space and a desire to make quilts, that counts. So now with that said, a small sewing area can absolutely start feeling frustrating if the space isn't working well. So my biggest suggestion is this: make your space work vertically, not just horizontally. When table space is limited, look at your walls. You can use pegboards or wall shelves or hooks or hanging organizers or little baskets. Anything that gets tools up off of the work surface can help. The second thing I would do is keep only your most used tools nearby. Not every quilting tool needs front row seating. Keep the things you reach for all the time close at hand. Your snips, your rotary cutter, your favorite ruler, your seam ripper, your pins, your thread, maybe your pressing tools. But the tools you use once in a blue moon can live somewhere else. That alone can make a small area feel calmer. Another tip is to use containers that actually fit your space. This right here is a favorite caddy that I use all the time. And oddly enough, it's called Everything Mary. I got it on Amazon. There's a link in the description if you're interested. I love it. It has pockets and places for everything that I need. and it fits into this little tiny carrier. I think many of us have bought wonderful storage containers only to discover they really don't fit the drawer or the shelf or the cart we had in mind. So be sure to measure first and then choose what you need. Even a few well-sized containers can make a huge difference in a tiny setup. So if you don't have room for a full ironing board, a wool pressing mat can also be very helpful. It gives you a pressing surface without demanding a whole extra footprint in the room. Now, when I'm filming tutorials, my space is really limited by the camera view. So I try to use sewing supplies that fit in the area. It sometimes takes finagling, but it's not difficult to make it work. And maybe most importantly, organize for the quilter you really are, not the one you imagine you should be. Organize your space in stages. If you plan to mostly piece during this quilting session, set up the supplies you need for piecing. If you plan to mostly cut and prep, make space for the cutting mat, the ruler, and the fabric you plan to be working with. If you're cutting small pieces, or even if you're foundation piecing, you can use a smaller cutting mat. If you're cutting quilting yardage, you'll need a larger ruler and a bigger cutting mat. Your sewing area should serve your actual habits during the time you are using the space. Let me repeat that. Your sewing area should serve your actual habits during the time you are using the space. So the truth is, some absolutely beautiful quilts have been made in tiny corners, on dining room tables, in bedrooms, apartments, shared spaces, and all kinds of less than perfect setups. So please don't think your quilting matters less because your space is small. It doesn't. And now we come to the letter that I think a lot of quilters are going to feel in their bones. This next quilter agreed to repair an old denim quilt for a friend, and now she can barely stand to look at it. So here it is, letter number 4 from Denim Despair. Dear Mary, I have a jean pants quilt an old friend gave me, asking me to repair it. It was held together with yarn ties, the whole top was coming apart, and the backing is too small for the top. Clearly, it's been very loved. I hate it. I have repaired the top and started to quilt the sandwich back down on my domestic machine after adding some additional backing to it, only to find out that I ran out of backing and will have to unpick and add even more backing to it. Seeing that, I lost my will to continue with repairing this quilt. I've had it in my possession for several years now, unfinished, waiting to be fixed, and I just can't muster up the energy to fix it, even though I offered to do so before I realized just how badly the quilt was made. What should I do? Do I give it back partially finished? Do I find a way to finish it, even though the sight of it just revolts me and I want to keep ignoring it? Thank you. Signed, Denim Despair. You know what I feel, the despair. Here's my answer. Oh my goodness, Denim Despair. First of all, thank you so much for being honest, because I think this is one of the most relatable quilting letters ever. And I know there are quilters listening right now who either have a project like this in their house or immediately thought of one when I started reading your letter. So thank you. Let me say this the right way. You are not a bad person because you hate this quilt. You're not unkind, you are not lazy, and you are not a failure because you no longer want to keep wrestling with a repair job that turned out to be far worse than you expected. You know what? Sometimes we say yes before we understand what we're really saying yes to. And that sounds exactly like what happened here. You agreed in good faith, then you found out that this was not a simple repair. This was a rescue mission. And those are not the same thing. A quilt can have enormous sentimental value to the owner, but that does not automatically mean it's a reasonable project for someone else to repair. That is an important distinction. And denim quilts can be difficult even under good circumstances. Denim is heavy. It creates bulk. There are thick seam intersections that can be hard to manage on a domestic machine. Older denim quilts may have stress on the seams, shifting layers, uneven construction, and all kinds of built-in structural issues that make repair work frustrating and physically demanding. So, what do I think you should do? Honestly, I think you need to stop thinking only in terms of do I finish it or not, and instead think in terms of what is reasonable now. To me, you have 3 honest options. Option 1, return it kindly and honestly. You could say something like, I wanted to help because I care about you and I know this quilt means a lot to you, but after getting into it, I realized it needs much more reconstruction than I'm realistically able to take on. I don't feel I can finish it well, and I don't want to keep holding on to something that belongs to you. Now, that's not cruel. That's just honest. And after several years, it may be actually kinder to return it than to keep carrying guilt over something you dread. So that's option one. Here's option two. Finish it in the simplest way possible. If you truly want to complete it just so it can be done and gone, then this is not the time to aim for beautiful. This is the time to aim for functional. Use the simplest backing solution, minimal quilting, stabilize what needs stabilizing, get it secure enough to be usable, and then return it respectfully. Not heirloom quality, not a masterpiece, just done. And I think sometimes as quilters, we need to remember that good enough to release it back into the world is a perfectly valid category. And then here's option three. Refer it to someone else. If this quilt is deeply sentimental and the owner truly wants it restored well, it may be better handled by someone who specializes in difficult repair or textile restoration. Because once something becomes a major reconstruction project, that is not always a normal favor anymore. My honest feeling, based on your letter, is that this quilt has already taken too much from you. And I don't think every favor should become a long-term burden. A lot of quilters are kind, helpful, capable people. And because of that, we sometimes become the place where everyone drops their unfinished, broken, sentimental, complicated sewing problems. And at some point you have to ask, is this mine to carry? And you know what? Sometimes the answer is just no. So, Denim Despair, I would not let this quilt haunt your sewing room for another 3 years. I would make a decision. Either finish it simply, return it kindly, or refer it out. But I would stop letting it hang over you. That quilt has occupied enough emotional real estate in your kind heart. I hope that helps. And by the way, the quilt behind me today is my Jelly Roll Bento Box quilt. It's available on our joyfulandmerryquilting.com website. Just click on store. The link is in the description. If you enjoyed today's session, please click like. And then subscribe to the Joyful and Merry Quilting YouTube channel so you don't miss the next one. And if you have a quilting question, story, or sewing dilemma you'd like to share, please send me an email, mary@joyfulandmerryquilting.com, or just leave a comment on this video. Your letter might be featured in a future session. And remember, we love how we quilt, we are done with guilt, and we kindly don't care what others think we should do. I am always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. Thank you so much for joining me.